Okay, so welcome to November, and also
spread the word! Sorry,
I
got excited. I would like to go first because I messed up. So it's November.
Yes, but you read something for the wrong month?
Yes. I read something for October. So I read The Witch Haven and I read the beginning of The Witch Hunt. I would like to tell everyone about The Witch Haven and why I'm excited about The Witch Hunt.
Okay.
So, The Witch Haven. It has all my favorite things. It has witches. It has a boarding school. It has murder.
Okay. Yeah.
It literally is like all my favorite things. I'm trying to think what's missing. Nothing. Nothing's missing.
Yeah,
Gay stuff. No, there's gay stuff. There's gay
Oh.
stuff. In The Witch Haven, you have Frances. She is a seamstress, and her boss attacks her, and she reacts to try and save her life and manifest magic. Everybody knows that her boss is a creep, but she's being questioned by police, and then all of a sudden, one young woman and one older woman come in a very rickety ambulance. This is also in 1911 in New York. They say, "You have tuberculosis. You have to come with us." And she's like, "What? I don't." So like the overseer, the female overseer of the seamstresses, like kicks her into the table. Basically, it was like, "Yeah, this explains your cough. So that way you don't go to jail." They take her to an asylum that is not a tuberculosis asylum. It is in fact a school for witchcraft, which sounds very exciting and wonderful. However, it sucks because this is 1911. It is still, what I really appreciated about this book is it still keeps like the rules of American society in place, front and center. It does not shy away from them, and it applies them to everybody in the book. By that I mean, just imagine if you were a young witch, you got into a school. What do you think that school would actually be like in 1911?
Like manners school?
Kind of.
Preparing you to marry someone?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much what it is.
So it's still all the outside, like, gender norms, just in which school.
The only
So
exception I
using
will
your
say,
magic to prepare tea.
and yeah, prepare tea, to darn socks, to do like, it's all very small magic. You have to practice this small magic every day, because otherwise it's going to take over you and you're not going to be able to control yourself. And like, it's just that same thing of women can't be trusted because their emotions are always out of control.
So is there a school for wizards on the flip side?
The book does not present it as a school.
Okay.
It is a secret society where men go to learn things.
Okay.
And Frances, she's the main character. The thing that brought about her magic, so magic is brought about by trauma. So the thing that brought about her magic was her boss attacking her. But before that, her brother died. Her brother was murdered, and she's just like kind of been a hollow shell. Sorry, shallow hollow person.
Oh,
Also kind
Also
of
sad. and her mother's at Blackwell Asylum. And this is also like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire has just happened. That's where we are in New York. In that time period, 2 of her classmates were in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Their magic was brought about by that factory. Only useful class is where they basically have to like tell their trauma. It's just therapy. They have to tell it over and over again. But the whole point, it's not so that they can actually process it. It's so that they cannot exert their power. It's so that they can keep their power under control. The first book is her figuring out that magic exists. There's a lot more that it can do besides darn socks, and that it is inherently unfair how it works, much like the rest of the world. She wants to do good, and there's a lot hampering her, including some very power-hungry people. And the second book is more of that, but Frances is now in a position of power and has an adversary. And I was wrong about who was the bad guy.
Oh, jeez.
yeah, that's always fun. I like that.
That is fun.
Yeah. So you would comp it to Witches of New York.
A little bit of Witches of New York. I felt a bunch of the same excitement that I felt reading Plain Bad Heroines that I got reading this.
Okay. So not necessarily a similar voice, just that similar like feeling that you had of wanting to keep wanting to keep with the story.
Very propulsive, very engaging. there were pieces that you could see would fit together, but there were like a possible 2-3 combinations of those pieces. And I was very excited to figure out what those were and very invested for what that would mean for all of the characters.
I read The Cloisters by Katy Hayes. So I really love dark academia. When I picked it up, I was like, okay, this looks like something like The Historian, which is like one of my favorite books of all time. So I was really excited to read it. And it starts with this woman who is, I believe, postgraduate school. So she's sort of looking for her next step. And, you know, like she's like talking to other students who are like, oh, after my graduate school, I'm doing this, you know, like fellow people that want to be scholars and get like placements in different museums and things like that. So she is living in Walla Walla. She has had a very sheltered life. She went to the college in Walla Walla because both of her parents worked there. So she hasn't really been able to get out of like her hometown for school, and she's feeling like shut in. And on top of that, her dad died in a tragic hit and run accident. And of course, it's like, I need to get out of here. So she gets a placement at the Met. And she's super excited about it.
Obviously.
Yeah, the Met.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, through a connection at the college. She's excited. She feels a little bit like, did I actually get this by merit? Or because I have this connection with this professor, you know? So she's feeling very insecure about all of this stuff. And her focus is the Renaissance period, which I learned a lot through this book about how, like, people are kind of like, oh, the Renaissance, so overdone. Like, you know, among her colleagues, kind of judgmental about that field of study. And her focus with the Renaissance stuff is she's really focused on these, like, weird items, like, sort of these, like, obscure relics that pop up. So she's like, not only is she Renaissance, but she's like niche Renaissance. Moves her life to New York, and she gets there, and the advisor is like, oh, the guy you were going to be working with who was hiring you is going out of the country. We don't have a place for you anymore. What? Yeah. And which is terrible.
Yeah.
I was like oh my God.
Oh my
what
God,
would you do?
And also, like, you can't do that.
No, if you're hired.
Yeah. You've been offered a job.
Yeah.
If your boss leaves, tough shit for the organization.
Right. It's like this weird thing too, where it's like this like postgraduate sort of like internship that is hopefully will turn into a job. You know, like a weird like.
Oh yeah, postgraduate shit actually is kind of bizarre like that. They can't just be like, actually no.
Right.
No one has.
We don't have a place for you.
Yeah.
She's sitting there. She's obviously devastated because she's like, well, what do I do now? I don't want to go back to Walla Walla. I have an apartment here. She's kind of going through her options, which are very scant. And a man comes in, and his name is Patrick. He is a professor, and he is a scholar, and he works at the Met. And he's like, actually, we need somebody to help over at the Cloisters. Basically, it's the only museum in the U.S. that focuses on medieval history. And actually, this was really interesting. It's built from stones from like a medieval monastery. They've like shipped them here. I think it was Rockefeller who like funded the whole thing, of course, says he did everything at the time.
And also like, oh my God, why?
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, bring me the stones from a monastery.
Medieval history to the new world.
It's a good thing he did a lot of good stuff with his money. Otherwise I'd be like, man.
Yeah, he's just spreading that legacy all around. So she goes to the cloister. She's like, oh, this is amazing. They have like all of the like the unicorn tapestries are there. And there's all of these like obviously like medieval relics all around. There's a garden where they actually have the plants that they would have planted at that time. So like belladonna and mugwort, all of that stuff is in there. Yeah.
All things to poison people with.
Yes. Yes. So she
the important thing, reader.
Yes. So she goes and she meets Rachel, who is going to be her colleague in this. And there's clearly something going on with Patrick and Rachel. He's basically trying to prove that at that time in the Renaissance, that was when tarot cards came along. Because at that time, you know, there was a lot of like people dabbling in divinity and things like that with like constellations. And he argues that tarot would make sense at that time. He's employing Rachel and Anne to be like digging through books to try to find proof that this was a thing. There's just a lot of suspense building up around them. There's something going on. There's something sinister happening. Not only is he looking for this tarot this like mysterious like tarot deck to prove that this was a thing in the Renaissance period, but there's obviously something going on with him and Rachel. There's a gardener named Leo who takes care of all of the plants, who is also thrown in there. So there's like sort of a weird love square happening.
Love square.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds stressful.
Yeah. They do acquire a tarot deck that seems to be from that period. Yes. Someone dies. Someone dies. Yeah.
All over a tarot deck.
Yeah. And so Rachel's a really interesting character. She is clever, sneaky, conniving. Yes. Cunning. Yes. Very Slytherin. Her and Anne become friends. And
is Anne a Hufflepuff?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a foil thing for sure. Yeah. With the tarot card thing, Anne, who is a very practical person, starts to sort of believe in the power of tarot cards throughout this, and starts to feel the energy from the tarot cards. Not only is it like this like thriller suspense thing, but it's also this idea of like, is like your fate written, and are you predestined? Like, was her father predestined to die? Like, was there anything that could have happened to change where she is in her life now? She starts to believe that there's nothing that she could have done, that it's all predecided, and the fates and all of that. Problematic mindset when it comes to doing
Murder.
Morally questionable things.
Doing murder.
Doing murder. Yes.
It was written in the stars.
Yeah, very thriller.
What even happened in this book?
Right.
Nothing. Everyone's fine. I read Winterland. It starts off with the mother, a prologue from Katerina's perspective of it seems like she's going to be called in for questioning. And you're like, oh, this is not going to end well. And she, instead of going to where she's supposed to go, she walks another way. And that's all you know. So, like, is she dead? Did she just leave the Soviet Union? Whatever happened, she either died or she left on purpose. She left behind her husband and Anya. The main story is from the daughter's perspective, and it takes place in Russia, mid-70s. Anya's story, she's like, she gets picked to start training for gymnastics. And I haven't had time to, but I'd like to. I'm sure all the gymnasts that they're talking about are real, but they're from like the 60s and 70s, so I like don't know them.
Yeah.
But it's wild to watch like video of gymnastics from like before the 90s, because so much stuff that they did, there weren't like rules yet of what you couldn't do. And so, so you just look back at these videos and they'll have the bars super close together and they're just like going and like no hands, like just propelling themselves off with their hips. That's not allowed anymore, by the way, because of like death. So this is sort of like showing sort of like the psyche behind, they're competing for Russia, like the motherland, and like how they, like, this is how they're serving their country and stuff. And that like sort of like brainwashy feeling of like what's going on. Early on in the book, Anya, when she's still, before she's even done her first like competition at all, and Anya's like all up in her 8-year-old head being like, I'll just do a back tuck here right quick in her apartment, and forgot she had socks on. And so she like does the tuck, but because the socks are on, her feet kind of slip when she goes to do it. So she totally like messes it up and breaks her ankle.
Oh God.
She's like terrified to tell the coach. So she's like scared to tell him. She goes with her dad, and he's like, so the doctors say she can't be back for like 4 to 6 weeks. And he's like, no, bring her. We'll have her talk to this other doctor and it'll be fine. He'll get, there's a shot or whatever.
They just pump her full of amphetamines, basically, and just say, like,
go
on your way.
Or like steroids or something directly into the ankle. I'm curious to see if Katerina died or if she might still be out there. And I do want to like look more at Russian, like what's happening in Russia at this time. Mm-hmm. The mom, Katerina, also like has this memory that comes up at the end of the first part. She's dancing in Swan Lake, and Stalin sees her, and she talks to him at the end. Doesn't ever tell anyone about that like interaction with him, but for a while she like really admired him, but she does start to question like Russian like outlook and stuff later on, which is why you're like, did she get there?
It's interesting to me to think about like a dictator like that and how he is perceived in Russia versus somebody like Mussolini in Italy, and like Hitler in Germany, and the kind of political landscape of Russia to have people still admire him.
Yeah,
just
that,
the everyday
that cult
person.
of personality.
Well, it was also sort of like
Yeah.
brought up in this a little bit. Like I said, I don't know that much about the politics of Russia and Russian history, but I think for a little bit, right after Stalin dies, because then someone else takes over, he was like, they were like, no, we hate Stalin. But then like later, like
Cancelled.
but then like a Stalinist comes back into power in the 70s or something, so they're like, Stalin is good again. Yeah, so like I guess it just depended on what the person in power also thought of the people.
What genre would you say that is, Julia?
Historical fiction? Seems like it.
I guess, but it's pretty, I mean, the 70s are that close. But yeah, historical or literary. The end, dear viewers.
Reader viewers.
Reader
Viewer readers. Viewers.
Viewers.
Readers.
Readers. Anywho, happy November.
Have a good holiday season.
Yes.
See you in December.
Yep.
Bye.
Goodbye.